the sake of this podcast, my name is Danny Tina, or Danny T, or Danny. So my background right now, I work in a nonprofit, but previously for about 7 years, I've worked outside doing different manual labor style jobs. I started off as a recreation technician where I was basically a glorified shit cleaner where I cleaned pit toilets, picked up trash, but I also did other really cool things. I helped out with the fire crew a lot where I was previously working. And then I decided I wanted to be on a fire crew out west. And I did, and I really loved it. I did about 4 seasons of being on a fire crew.
Very cool. And did you spend a lot of time in the forest? Or did
Yeah,
you?
growing up, yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, what did you cover like northern regions of Arizona, or did you cover like farther down south regions of Arizona?
I like to say the portion of Arizona that I worked in was like the eastern portion of Arizona, about like the center to like the northern portion.
Okay, very cool. And how many times or how much time did you end up spending in these areas?
With this particular story, I spent 2 seasons on a crew in that area, on that particular area. My other season of fire, I spent on the same forest, just a different district, just a different area.
Okay, very cool. And why don't you just go ahead and lead into the story? But before we get into that, why don't you tell me this one particular thing? Have you ever, is this the one weird thing you've experienced while you were out there, or are there like other little nuances that you've experienced over time?
There's definitely little nuances I've experienced, when working, but some of it, I don't know if it was necessarily paranormal. Sometimes it felt definitely purposeful. For example, like the first time I ran into a bear was in Arizona, and I just remember something about it was just like kind of weird, and I think something led me to run into the bear. I know that sounds weird, but I would say honestly, my whole life though, I've never really had any on experiences I couldn't explain.
Okay, very cool. So nothing, no crazy out of this world experiences over the course of your time out here. Now, why don't you get into the main story that we brought you on to talk about? So, just I guess start from the beginning. What happened?
Sure. So, my first season of being on this fire crew, I was working on a forest that is generally really well recreated. A lot of developed campsites, but that's more so in the northern portion of the forest where I work. It didn't have a lot of developed campsites, so if people wanted to recreate there, they kind of had to work for it a little harder. There's not a lot of roads out there, and it's not that traveled. I mean, people definitely go there, but it's not busy. The fire crew I was on, it was a smaller Type 2 initial attack crew, so it was about 10 people on this crew, and we had 2 duty stations, one at a lower elevation where all the rest of the forest employees worked out of, and a duty station that was up a really mountainous, windy road up in a higher elevation that was really remote. And at this duty station, there was an old Forest Service ranger station there, and a newer double wide trailer that was more so recently put in. And when I used to work there, there was no cell phone reception. So typically the crew, when we weren't working during the day or on a fire, we just spent our time, using a projector to watch movies or playing horseshoes outside. So for the creepy story, kind of just to add as a predecessor to the story, is that my supervisor on that crew had some creepy stories related to this duty station at higher elevation. One of them was that he was cowboy camping outside. Cowboy camping basically just means that you're sleeping not in a tent, you're just literally sleeping on the ground. and he said that he kept getting a weird drop of mucus on his face, and this area has a lot of ponderosa pine. There's a lot of tree coverage, and he wasn't necessarily under a tree, so he said it wasn't tree sap, and it just didn't feel like tree sap. Tree sap's like a lot more sticky. He said that there was no one else out there. He even like yelled out to see if anyone was messing with him, and there was just no one there. So he told me the story, and one of my other coworkers said, ever since that happened to my supervisor never slept outside again. So I do believe that he was telling me the truth and not just messing with me. Do you guys want me to keep going?
Yeah. I was gonna say that sounds like
Okay.
that definitely sounds like he's a little freaked out more than just some fun hazing. That sounds like he was really disturbed by something.
Real quick,
Yes.
can you explain what a Type 2 attack? You said Type 2 attack crew.
Type 2 initial attack crew.
What is the responsibilities of that? Like, what is that?
So a Type 2 initial attack crew is a crew that is meant, so it's not tied to an engine typically. Like, in fire, there's people who are tied to engines, there's hot shot crews, there's smoke jumpers, there's hell attack crews. A Type 2 IA crew is kind of similar in the sense, kind of similar to a hot shot crew in the sense that they're not tied to a particular, like, big piece of equipment like a helicopter or engine. But it's like we're a standalone crew that is meant to put out small starts. So if like lightning starts in the middle of nowhere, and the fire district decides they want that fire put out right away, they don't want it to spread, then we go in there and we put out that small start.
Okay.
So it usually is like a lot of hiking into remote areas, and in this particular forest, there was not a lot of roads, so there was hiking.
All right, well, then continue.
Okay. So, for my creepy story, like I said, I experienced some weird things, but not too many. And this particular day was July 4th, or it was near July 4th. I just know that we did our work day, and we were just, like I said, doing what we normally do, just playing horseshoes outside, having a good time. And the next day, I knew we were going to have a PT hike, which is just a physical training hike where you have to like have your gear, and which is about 45 to 50 pounds, depending on what you're carrying. And we basically just hiked up, no trail, just straight up like a mountainside. So it was meant to like really be challenging. And that being said, I knew I wanted to go to bed early, and I went to bed before the rest of the crew. People were still outside hanging out, and I was sleeping in the double wide trailer. I had my own room, and I just remember my bed was right next to a really large window. And this double wide trailer, like this window itself was probably like, I would say like 6 to 7 feet off the ground, to be honest. So, the trailer was raised a bit, and I slept with my head right under the window. And I remember I started to doze off, but I still felt awake, and I heard one of my coworkers outside the window asking me to come outside. And it was really normal, especially like it really felt like this particular crew member was literally, my coworker was really outside saying, "Hey, Danielle, come outside." Oh, I just said my real name. That's okay. During this time, I, just said, no, I don't want to go outside. And they kept beckoning me, but slowly but surely, their voice started to change to a deeper, raspier, angrier voice. They started cursing at me. They were saying, "Get the fuck outside, you motherfucking bitch." And I just like froze. I just remember I couldn't really move. Like I was literally just frozen in space, and I was really scared. It was actually kind of a demonic voice as well. And I just laid there while it was yelling at me. Eventually it stopped. I don't really remember like what happened between the time it stopped and between the time I fell asleep, but I know I woke up the next day. I felt really weird, and I wanted to ask my coworker about it, but like I said, it just felt weird asking a question like, "Were you standing outside my window last night?" It just felt weird to ask. Um, that's really all I have, and that's the story. The only thing I could maybe what it was could have been sleep paralysis, but like I said, I don't know. I don't get sleep paralysis, so that's my story.
It's kind of scary. It's scary. So to have someone that I don't know how close. I'll say someone that's close to you in a sense start like screaming at you, and when you say demonic voice, I picture their voice being deeper than it normally is.
Right. I mean, it just wasn't their voice anymore.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So I mean that alone is kind of creepy. And you said this was out when you were in the middle of nowhere, correct?
Yes, this is very much out in the middle of nowhere. There's not a lot of roads out here. Sometimes we'd see cars traveling up the road, but this was nighttime,
Hmm.
and it's pretty rare that you'd see a lot of cars out at that night or just random people.
So I guess what I want to ask is, this. Let me make sure I'm getting the story right here. So you heard this voice, and it was your coworker, but it wasn't your
Yeah.
coworker.
Well, that's what I'm suspecting. And the one thing I forgot to add too was that, when you have that feeling that someone is near you, like you
Right.
could feel someone's presence near you.
Yeah.
It felt like that. That's also the one thing I forgot to leave out is that with like my head was towards the window and I was sleeping on my side. I remember distinctly I was sleeping on my side, kind of curled up, and I just felt like almost like felt their shadow over me, looming over the window. It wasn't like their head was just peering. Like this person was pretty tall, like this particular coworker, so like they maybe could have just like reached their head to the window, but I felt like someone was looming over me.
What's particularly weird about this entire situation is, let's take into account, what if your coworker was fucking with you, right? Like it was
Yes.
supposed to be some kind of joke, like they were trying to scare you.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't they bring it up the next morning? Because that would have been the entire purpose of it. Why wouldn't they be like, "Oh, how many thing weird happened last night?" Like trying to poke fun at you, and that's the whole point of it. Why I
Right.
would have expected, if they were the ones screwing with you, why didn't they say anything about it the next day?
Yeah, and on a fire crew, it's common that people will fuck with each other. I mean, people will like rock each other's gear packs, like they'll put rocks in their packs just to weigh them down more. Like people do fuck with each other, and like this guy in particular, I could have imagined would have, if he was actually fucking with me, I think he would have tried to make it even scarier, to be honest. Like he would have really tried to fuck with me more.
Huh. No, that's really
If you know
weird.
what I mean.
Yeah. And also, how tall was
And
this
yeah, no,
window? Was it person height, or did he have to be taller than he normally was?
from what I remember, like this guy was about 6 feet. Like he was pretty tall, and I think that his head might have just reached the window. But like I said, like whatever was out there would have been like looming over me, so they would have had to be even taller. And
Uh-huh.
yeah, like the next morning we all had to be ready for a PT hike, and it's the morning. Some people aren't morning people. Like it was just a
Hmm.
regular morning for everyone else. For me, I felt kind of weird. I was just thinking about this
So
experience I had the previous night.
what? Let's say it's not, because I mean we're thinking it's not. It wasn't your coworker. So let's say it's not. What do you
Yes.
think it might have been?
Um, I don't know. I know there's a lot of like lore and folklore throughout Arizona of different paranormal creatures. Um, some people talk about. I remember distinctly, like you mentioned, skinwalkers, and I just remember like we've had plenty of nights when I was on that fire crew just gathered around the fire, and we would call them SWs at night because we didn't want to like invite them in. I guess that was like one thing.
Yeah, one thing with skinwalkers is you're not supposed to talk about them when you experience
Right.
encounters with them, because that would bring like bad juju.
Right. And here we are talking about them. So yeah, I mean, I would have no clue. I honestly don't. I mean, I know in that region, some people, if they're, I mean, this is just one thing I've heard, and this is all through like word of mouth. Like, obviously, like this is not scientific research, and I don't know. I'm a skeptic until I see something different, but I don't want to see it. If you know what I mean. So some people even believe like Bigfoot is kind of in that area, if there is a Bigfoot in Arizona. But like I said, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I believe in that either. So I don't know what it was. I couldn't really explain if it was my imagination or if it was an actual like entity.
I've had people pull out of the show, like straightforward, that they've pulled out like last minute because they're afraid to talk about skinwalker encounters. Like we've done how many episodes? 4 now of skinwalkers, I think. But like there have been many more opportunities for us to do them, but like last minute I've had like 3 people pull out because they're like, "Look, man, every time I talk about this thing, a bunch of weird shit starts happening. Like I just can't do it, man." And then, we never get the interview. So, it really sucks, and the whole purpose of this podcast is for people to be able to share these stories because, what's our saying, Nana? It's your experience, and we're not here to tell you otherwise. And the show's not about us. That's not why we do the show. It's not. People don't come here to listen to me and Dane, talk about a bunch of random shit. They come here to hear these stories that people have because people are seeing something out there, and whether it's a skinwalker story or Bigfoot, there's just too many of these stories for it to be, oh, it was a bear, oh, your mind's playing tricks on you. Like, there's something going on out there, whether it's what people think it is or not. There's something to these stories, and I think your story is a perfect example. I don't think your friend was, fucking with you in the middle of the night. I think that certainly something happened. As for what it was, I don't know if we'll ever really know, but I mean, it's definitely really, really creepy.
Yeah, I remember being like distinctly pretty scared, and even for me, like in that area, even like at night, it was kind of always creepy being outside. Like if I was outside by myself, it was not something I mean, I was typically at night not outside by myself. I usually just, stayed in either the old ranger station or I stayed in the double wide trailer.
So, do you know the history of the area that you were staying in? Like, do you know if there were previous fires or maybe I don't want to get into like CSI territory or like homicides or animal attacks, or do you know if there's things of that sorts that could lead, or it in theory could lead to a paranormal activity?
Honestly, yeah, I think this area like has an interesting history, and I think it's like, I mean, it's a pretty remote area, and one thing is that like there have been some really big fires. I feel like if I say what the fire is, it kind of just totally gives away where this area is. So there have been some like notable Arizonan fires. The thing about this forest was what was weird, and like we had a fire lookout who would stay in a tower and look out for lightning starts or any smoke that he would see on the district, and he just explained that the district itself is just interesting, because after that big fire, like it definitely torched a lot of the fuel, and it was almost just like a pocket that didn't get as much fires as other places because it had a pretty significant fire. I do remember at the time also, this area, like in the ranger station, one of the refrigerators had like a posting of a like most wanted ad for this guy in Arizona. I forget where he like lived in Arizona, but he like shot his family and was on the run.
Wow.
And yeah, so I don't remember the guy's name, but
I
That
think
was something also that was kind of notable.
so. To talk about that, the reason the most wanted poster was there is because this man was known to be in the area.
Yeah, like he was well, I don't know about that particular area, but I know that like the on the most wanted ad it described the person as like a really avid outdoorsman,
Yeah.
and someone really experienced in the outdoors. And um honestly, the only people who are really out in this area, like there's some ranchers dispersed throughout the area, but that's really it.
Mm. What I'm kind of leaning towards, because let's take the it was your coworker and throw that out the door.
Mhm.
So let's isolate it to this was an not extraterrestrial, but like a paranormal slash, type of experience. I'm kind
Yes.
of leaning towards like something was really out there and it was trying to get you to leave the safety or the comfort of your little space. What was it? A trailer you said?
Yes.
Yes. So let's say they were trying to make you leave the trailer is kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah,
Right.
I don't know, man. Like, it's really hard to pinpoint these things down because so how we do this is we generally categorize stuff. So there's extraterrestrial kind of stuff that we deal with, which is flying saucers, little green men, little gray men. Then we have Sasquatch, obviously, which is the like bipedal humanoid primate that we get into, and that's really easy to classify. Stories like that. But when we get into the paranormal stuff, man, it's fucking weird because it's like there's all these subcategories, and there's demonic, and then there's like I don't know if you really classify Wendigo and Skinwalkers as like cryptids or paranormal or what they are exactly, because like we don't really know what the fuck they are. So like whenever we just hear these kind of stories about just really weird phenomena, it's hard to categorize this, and I really don't know where I would put this one other than it's displaying mimicry, which is that's a sign of demonic kind of style stuff. But I mean, I don't know, man. It's in the middle of a forest, like it's weird, man. I don't know how to categorize it. I really don't.
I'm
Right.
definitely shooting towards paranormal because to get into the debate territory, skinwalkers, Bigfoot, Wendigos, all that stuff, I classify that with cryptids, and then the paranormal is I group because I guess the stuff is somewhat subjective. It's objective and then subjective. So you could say a ghost, that's paranormal. Everyone will say that. But to me, when you group in stuff like reapers, for
Right.
example, I'll group that into paranormal. Or when you group up stuff like astral projection and the sleep paralysis entities, I group that with paranormal. But some other people might just put that in some class. You know.
Yeah, and I have one other story of that area that someone else told me. That was also just like a weird experience for them. And like I said, I like had that experience where I ran into a bear. And like obviously, like I mean, there's a lot of bears. There's actually like a ton of bears in this particular area, like a lot of them. And I just remember like so this area also used to be like an area where there was logging. But so sometimes like we do PT hikes where we would just run into like random like old dozers that were like broken down, just left in the middle of the woods. Um, so like this one, so yeah, like when I ran into the bear, I found like an old logging road, and I just took the road. Like I was actually heading back to the duty station at this point, but I just decided, oh, I'm just gonna take this road. Like something pulled me onto the road, and that's where I ran into the bear. And like I said, I know this sound it's weird for me to like say this because it makes me sound like weird. It makes me feel like people might think I'm weird, but that's fine. I don't really care. I later on in my fire, like later on in my career of working on fire, one of my coworkers who has been doing fire for like 16 seasons or so was like, yeah, my first permanent job was where he used to work. And he told me a scary story for him that was in this area, in this region, where there was like an area near a creek that was like known to be an area that you just don't go into. Like, ranchers told him, like, when I lose cattle down there, I actually don't go to retrieve them. And this coworker of mine was like, well, I'm curious now, so I'm going to go out there. And basically there's like a kind of like an old road that could kind of get you to this point, but you have to hike like a few miles in to actually get to this creek. And he said that at a certain point, as he got out of his car and was hiking about 1.5 miles in towards the creek, he had this overwhelming sense of something not wanting him there. And this particular guy, like, he used to be a range tech. Like, he's been stalked by mountain lions before, so he said it was totally different than that. Like, something distinctly did not want him there. And he really couldn't hike much further until he had to turn around. And as soon as he, like, basically started heading back, when he was, like, about 1 mile from his truck, he felt a lot better. Things just felt normal again.
It's fucking weird. I wonder what's happening to those damn cattle out there. Cattle mutilations,
right?
Dude. That's some creepy shit. Like, one of the first interviews that I ever did off camera, this guy never came on. He was this really old guy. Like, I think he was in his... He was old. This happened back in 75. And he lived out in Tennessee, and his neighbor had a cattle mutilation incident. One really weird, isolated cattle mutilation. And cattle mutilations always freak me out, dude. By the way, to our viewers... We now have updated the website. There's now a research tab. If you go down there, you can read all of these stories that I reference. People that don't come on, we still write out their stories and talk about them. And you can read up on them. So, link in the description. Go check it out. But that story is in there. And cattle mutilations always freak me out, though. Like, that one's... I don't know if that's extraterrestrial or some type of... I don't know, man. Like, it's just super fucking weird. Super weird.
Yeah, and for a rancher to not want to retrieve cattle lost in a certain area is a pretty big deal, because ranchers, I mean, that's their livelihood, is the cattle. So
do you know why they don't go down there? Like, was it ever explained, or is it kind of just like you don't want to know, you just don't go down there?
There is some lore, and like obviously it's like important to maybe like, you know, emphasize obviously like everything out here is basically stolen land from indigenous people. And like, I guess in this particular area, I think that when colonizers or, you know, people were coming in, taking over the land and having these battles and these fights with indigenous people, you know, there is that lore. I mean, obviously that's happened there. Yeah. And, you know, There is some of that was noted in terms of like lore in that particular area.
So you're kind
not so much lore. I mean, it actually happened, but I mean,
you're kind of alluding towards that's like a no-go zone because of, I don't want to say the atrocities, but of bad things that have happened in that area, leading to it to be, you know, kind of just like superstitious.
I think so. Like, if I were to like make my own judgment, is that like basically maybe there is some type of entity that could be out there that's kind of just trying to keep its like just kind of guard certain land, possibly. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's definitely, like I said, I mean, people talked about SWs as we sat around the campfire, and even my supervisor, you know, when he had that incident with the mucus outside, he thinks it wasn't like a malevolent spirit. He thought it was actually just like something that was just messing with him to be fun. You know, I think that there are things out there that maybe could mess with people just for fun. Whatever I was feeling that night was not fun. It didn't want to have fun. I think it wanted me to, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I can't even imagine if like I went outside or if I acknowledged it anymore. I mean, I just froze and I stopped talking to it.
I think that, well, it is good you didn't go outside, because who knows what would have happened. But I don't know, man. I don't know.
I loved your story. I really do. And
thank you.
Yeah, no, that's really, really uncomfortable, certainly, to be talking about, especially in, you know, out in the middle of the forest. That would really unnerve me for a long time. And Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why. So, yeah, that's just really uncomfortable. I don't really know what else to say. So I guess we'll kind of move into a new section here. I say we what do you think is possibly out there? Do you think that, like, what's your opinion on things like Sasquatch and stuff like that? I personally, like, with the Arizona Sasquatch stuff, I don't know. I think it's a little par down. I 100%, with the evidence that we have, like the Sierra Sounds and the Patterson film and a lot of stuff like that. And now we've got those new 2020 vocalizations out in Canada that are the same as the Sierra Sounds this year. I 100% believe that there's some type of like bipedal primate out in the northern regions of like from Canada down to almost California, probably, that because there's a lot of untouched forest regions up there that just go straight up through. So I 100%.
Right.
So what do you think about? I guess we'll start with Arizona Sasquatch. Do you believe that that is something that could exist, or do you believe that these things are just exclusive to these upper regions, or if they exist at all?
So yeah, I don't personally, like I said, I'm skeptical until I see something different, but I don't necessarily want to see it. I think that in terms of, yeah, there's been places in Arizona that I've gone to where I'm like, wow, like this is almost like Mars. I feel like it's just so interesting and remote and something like I've never seen before. But I don't personally think if I don't personally believe so much in Sasquatch. I think if there is going to be any Bigfoot type, Sasquatch type creature, I actually believe the Himalayas are where there might be that, because I mean, I just think most places have been traveled through now. And I think like the Himalayan mountains, like where the Yeti is known to be, to me, if there is going to be anything out there, it would be like the Yeti, because the Himalayas are like pretty extreme in a way. And all animals there are really elusive and hard to find.
Yeah, 100%. Like if you talk to like people that study certain like endangered species, like if you talk to tiger biologists in where is it? In certain areas of China, that they know that those animals are out there, but the biologist will tell you you'll be lucky if you see two in a lifetime, like in person. And I'm like,
Right.
that's shocking. That's an animal that we know is there. What if there's something that has even smaller populations that we don't know is there? We would never
Right.
see them. There'd be maybe one or two accounts from a handful of people, but beyond that, you never hear about them. So,
I mean, you got to keep in mind we discover new species of, anything from frogs to insects to fish to, I don't know, mammals like squirrels or some shit like that every single year. So you can't really discredit, well, I haven't seen Bigfoot, and this group of 1 million people haven't seen them either, so they don't exist. But what about that group of 4,000 people over there that have, had evidence or seen or heard, like Daniel, for example?
so I see. Are you ready to wrap it up? I think we covered
Yeah.
everything really. I really liked your story, and I thank you for coming on 100%. And that was I had a great time talking to you.
Awesome. I had a lot of fun talking to you guys too. Thanks so much for being interested in my story and letting me talk to you guys.